So I'm Roger Skillen with Daybreak Adult Care in San Leandro. And today we're going to be talking about the Co-op Adult Day program. And I'd like to welcome my two panel members, Jamie Escobus. He's the Senior Director of Companioa. Is that right? Is that how you say that?
Compania, like your companion, yes.
Glad I asked. So, and dementia services, comprehensive dementia services by the Institute on Aging. And I'd like to introduce Alison Moritz. She's the director of the Enrichment Center at the Institute on Aging in the Presidio, which you can see behind Jamie. It's a wonderful facility. So a little background on the the Co-op Adult Day program. It was a pilot program that we collaborated with the Institute on Aging, for an adult day program to see if we could reduce the costs of the daily costs for folks to come in and join, see if we could reduce isolation, provide education and support to people, to caregivers, and basically kind of address a lot of the stressors that they experience in their role, taking care of their loved ones. So it started in June of 2021. And we started there at the center, and I worked with Alison. She's instrumental in getting things going there. I'll let them talk a little bit more about what their roles are at IOA. Worked with Alison for about a year, and then I think it was about a year later, I think, Jamie, you came on board, or it was late 21, I think it was, like in the fall of 21, you came on board. And you've been instrumental too in helping getting the management pieces of the co-op in place and whatnot behind the scenes, and did a lot of assisted me quite a bit in kind of the nuts and bolts of what I was doing in terms of enrollment, packets, things of that nature. So, and then last October, Jamie and I had the honor of going to the NADSA National Conference in Pittsburgh, and we were able to present the co-op to folks there to other adult day programs that might be interested in replicating and bring a program like that on board at their organization. So anyway, so I'd like to welcome you both here. Why don't you guys just give me just a brief rundown of what you do at IOA, and what your roles are there, and then we can kind of roll into the program and what we're doing and kind of what the aims were and some of the things that we experienced while we did that.
Jamie, do you want to go first?
Okay, sure. Yes, you're right. This is Jamie Escobus, Senior Director of Companioa. I have had the pleasure of supporting the team at the Enrichment Center. And you're correct. Wow, great memory. I started in the fall of 2021, just kind of coming off of the most challenging parts of the pandemic. And I remember early on during the interview process, the mention of the co-op and how really intriguing that was for me, and how exciting it was for me to get in and get engaged with the team and learn more about it. So I will say I had it was good timing for me to get to be a part of the project and the process. As far as other kind of things about, I guess, me and my role, in addition to supporting the Enrichment Center team, we also have a caregiver coaching program. And I get to oversee that as well. That's another service supporting our family caregivers, as well as supporting our home care team and their dementia skills and expertise in offering services as well through Institute on Aging. I have about 25 years of experience in memory care and dementia related services, and most recently have appreciated the opportunity to be in a nonprofit environment and doing really creative programs like the co-op. I'll turn it over to Alison.
So I too had the pleasure to work with everyone to make what was a really brilliant idea and to fill a need in the community that was huge and is still a need in the community. And to be on a team that's evolving this project is incredible. So I wanted to give a shout out first and foremost to Imka Diaguino. This was sort of part of this larger brainchild of hers, where it's a tiered system of affordable and accessible care for those who are living with dementia, with a focus on community and the caregiver too. So Imka is a wonderful therapist, and she was with Dolby Brain Health. She's with Sutter now, but this would not be something without her. So the part of the co-op that we got to really focus on was the day program. So for anyone that's not too familiar with our specific day program, it's a social model, and it focuses on engagement for folks who are living with any stage or any diagnosis that's causing their dementia. And it's a non-medical model. So we get to focus on things like exercise, quality of life, mental stimulation, just keeping cognition as sharp and firing as possible, while giving folks a really fun and love-filled day. So of course, programs like this cost money to run. They're not funded by any of the Medicaids. So it's often private pay. We have grants from the city. We have contracts with organizations like the Veterans Association, so veterans can come, but most of it's left up to families to pay for. So while this is completely accessible for some, it's not accessible for everyone, particularly those who are living in the sandwich generation and also taking care of their own children. Most of the participants that come to our program do still live at home with their caregivers. So this co-op was really designed to tackle that in broad, and we'll get more into the details, but it was so that families could come at half discounted rate. Their loved one attends 3 days a week, and a loved one, whether it's a neighbor, adult child, spouse, or a handful of different members of their care team, would come for the day, work what we call light duty, and I can explain that a little later too. That would offset the program's cost of staffing. And then in turn, the caregiver gets to have access to this really lovely community. So that's a very broad overview of the operational side of the co-op here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I definitely want to give a shout out to Imka. She's with currently she's with Sutter and also with the President's Care Project in San Francisco. Was instrumental. Was her kind of her baby. She came up with the idea of it all. So thank you, Imka, if you hear this. So yeah, so the co-op became operational in June of 21. And so we went through a period, this was during the pandemic. So we started off with kind of putting the word out, conducting some outreach, see if people were interested in this novel idea, maybe coming in, being a caregiver where they volunteer their time, skills, and to come in, volunteer in the program and kind of offset, like the staffing costs, kind of assume the role of staff members, to see how that went for them. So, and I understand even now, Daybreak's involvement ended officially in December of 22, but I understand that there's still some folks who still come in, even though unfortunately, they've lost their loved ones. They still come in. They built such a community and support system amongst themselves. It was so organic that they just come in still and still volunteer on certain days of the week. I think that's a big testament to the power of what this program provided caregivers. So, Alison, what were some of the type of activities and whatnot that the caregivers would engage in? And what kind of reception did they receive from the other folks in the program, as well as the care recipients? And what kind of impact did that have on your organization in running the program day to day?
Right. So as I mentioned, they did light duty tasks. And what that means is they really interact with the participants that come throughout the day. Some of the needs are they just need a person to be one-on-one with them, to maybe do a really accessible activity, go for a walk with them. We're lucky that we're in the Presidio. it was really that moment to moment, person to person interaction. Staff can do that, but of course staff have to focus on helping folks with larger activities. The staff are helping with continence care. So these things that really left a little bit of a gap was a perfect fit for the co-op members. So we really wanted to focus on their skill set too. So we had some that were like, hey, I can do all the dishes till the cows come home. So they would just run the show after we had our meal service. Some just had an incredibly calming presence. So if we had a new participant starting and they had higher levels of anxiety, totally understandably, they could sit with them and just give them that reassurance, sort of be their safe person, that anchor throughout the day. So it really, truly transformed how participants were able to start the program and really proceed in their participation as they needed one-on-one.
And, there was one gal, Holly, that would come in, friend of Vera, and she would come in and she developed relationships with the care recipients in providing them with meal assistance and giving them one-on-one attention, and which staff would do normally, but she was able to really concentrate on that and develop relationships with care recipients, and build a real high level of trust and whatnot. And I was always impressed by that, just by the caring nature that she had, that she was able to really bring that to the care recipients and develop those relationships with them. And I thought that was really powerful.
Oh, totally. I mean, you kind of set up and build a program, but then when you see the actual outcome of the human connections that are forged, I mean, it was just so beautiful. And like you had mentioned, for folks whose loved ones passed away, they continued to come, and they were all here on Friday, including Holly. And so they would say things like, if it weren't for this program, I wouldn't have anything to do with my mom. We can't go out to the grocery store like we used to. It gave, we can't go out to the movies. Just experiences didn't resonate like they used to. So they really felt kind of trapped at home. Being here, they had a safe environment that was incredibly supportive. They could see for example, their mother be social again, dancing with people. I mean, it was incredibly transformative for the relationships of the co-op members too.
Yeah, when I came on board as the coordinator for Daybreak to do this, so much of my mindset was focused on bringing relief to the caregivers, right? Reducing their isolation, giving them something to go to, kind of creating something with common purpose. And the thing that I never even considered, but what happened was the level of comfort and ease that was given to the care recipients. I know one of the caregivers said she was able to come in, and over time, her mom became more relaxed and was less clingy to her. And she was able to relax and enjoy her time with other people and not have to always know where her daughter was at all times. Which it freed both of them up, her daughter was able to go and interact with other people while being there and knowing that her mom's okay, and vice versa. Her mom was able to relax a little bit and socialize and do other things without having to think about her daughter and where's my daughter right now and so on. So it was really a freeing experience for both of them.
Yeah, and I think another group that we didn't anticipate for this to affect as much were people that lived in facilities. So sometimes when a spouse would go visit a husband, in this case, there wasn't much for them to do and engage with together at the facility. It just felt kind of stilted. But when they came to the center together, it was almost like they were out on a date. Like they got to see each other in this social setting, connect in a totally different way. Again, I use the example of dancing, but I remember them so vividly dancing together and just tears in the wife's eyes, because they connected in a way that for whatever reason wasn't possible at the facility that he had moved into. And even from that, when we did have a group of men move to a facility, the wives actually all kept in touch, and they were able to go and do sort of group visits, check in on all the husbands. So it really carried on after they attended here and when they moved to different situations. So that network and that bond that was built was just, it was lovely. You can't plan for that sort of stuff.
You really can't. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there were two different families that had that crossroads where they were going to have to get a higher level of care. And they actually, because of the friendship, the bonds, the community that they created there at the co-op, they actually decided, let's go to this facility so we can be together there as well. So that is pretty powerful in my estimation, the power of what occurred at that co-op, and the friendships that were forged, and the level of community that was created. For someone to do that says a lot. And they were able to take that support, not only from just the center of going there every day. Yeah, we get support. We're here today. I'm getting support between, say, 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, but it extended far beyond that, to the point where, hey, you know what? We're gonna go to this facility together. So it really did extend so much further.
And without taking up too much of the floor, that just really kind of ties in one thing, that it's absolutely worth bringing up some of the hurdles that we had and the challenges. When we built out the model, we really had designed a part of it that incorporated support, like support groups and education sessions. We thought having that support and sort of training would be invaluable. One of the learnings was it was really hard to coordinate everyone to be on site at the same time. So that was an interesting finding. Again, everyone has their lives going on outside of here. So to assume everyone can come on a Tuesday morning proved to be a big challenge. That being said, a lot of that community and support, and even training to a certain effect, really happened organically. So we were able to see that we didn't necessarily have to have these designated times and training sessions. Of course, they always had access to those, but the way that they got that information and support, again, happened a little more organically day to day. So that was an interesting finding that we did come across.
Right, yeah. Jamie, from an organizational standpoint, in terms of in the background, bringing people on board, going through the enrollment process, I guess in legal terms, I suppose you would say that the caregivers coming in and volunteering, they are actual volunteers. So as an organization, how did you handle that component with people coming in, being volunteers, any kind of hoops that they would need to jump through to be able to meet not only the expectations and the policies and procedures of an organization, but things that they may need to be aware of legally in terms of coming in and being in that volunteer role?
Right. Well, I would definitely defer to each state to know their volunteer policies, right? Depending on where their day program is located. Because you would want to follow those same procedures for any volunteers that we would want to be counting as part of our team. So the consideration we had to make was, if this individual is committed to being a volunteer and enrolled in our co-op, we really needed to be prepared to do the necessary steps, which would include the TB test, as well as a screening, a background check. So those things, in order for us to count them in our staffing or supporting our ratios per se, or to filling that gap, we would have to go through those extra steps. So during the pilot, we weren't necessarily fully committed to making that a step that we required of family members, because again, we were kind of exploring this model. But moving forward, that would be something that any organization that would be taking this on would want to incorporate those steps, as far as also documenting that training that Alison is talking about, and making sure that all of those boxes are checked at the beginning to ensure that they're compliant. And Alison had touched on kind of the gaps that the individuals would fill. And for us, especially, and I remember Alison talking about this early on before I even started, she'd experienced that those volunteers were really critical in getting her through some of the challenges related to staffing. As we discussed, that was during COVID, right? We were rolling this out at a time when we were all challenged by having the necessary amount of team members available to show up to shifts because of really essentially maybe being infected, or the potential of being infected, or the risk that was involved. So we experienced a lot of challenges around that. And these volunteers coming in really helped us get through some of those moments where we were stretched very thin. But knowing we could count on those individual caregivers coming in to help support was definitely a lifesaver.
Yeah, I would imagine. It was a challenging time. I think as time has passed, I tend to forget some of the things that we all experienced during the pandemic, let alone trying to get a program like this up and moving, making it operational. Yeah, and so you would experience there would be issues with staffing naturally as a result of that. So they were able to come in and play a role in, like you said, in filling some of those gaps.
For
So,
sure. I think the hard part or another maybe hurdle is, putting that extra kind of, I guess, responsibility on the family members to take the time to get these additional requirements fulfilled. And so being upfront with families right in the beginning is important to make them aware. It might require them a little extra time in the beginning to be set up to be a part of the program, but to hopefully demonstrate that it's worth it to them in the end. So if they can take the time to go to the clinic or maybe you provide a nurse that can be on site at your program that could administer their TB test while they're there visiting, might make it a little easier for them, because we know the caregivers are so already stretched and burdened by the tasks that they have. So anything you can do as an organization, I think, to minimize some of those steps for them is important. So the on-site TB test, making the backgrounds or other educations really accessible to them in ways that maybe you haven't thought of before would be helpful, just so that they can be willing and able to take the time to get that stuff done.
yeah, there's a different dynamic there, isn't there, between like onboarding somebody who's like a staff member coming into an organization as an employee versus somebody as a volunteer, especially somebody who's a caregiver, recognizing the stressors, the things that they're already dealing with in their lives, and the fact that they're coming in sort of in a manner that's not like a regular volunteer. There's a little bit of a difference there. So yeah, I think that's an important point that you make. You want to make that as easy on them as possible, less onerous, so they have to jump through so many hoops, or the hoops that they do have to jump through. Yeah, you make it as easy for them as possible to do that. Yeah, that's wonderful. So tell me more about the like in the staffing ratios. Now there's some things, as I understand it, there would be some tasks that depending on the state someone is in, but like the state of California, there are some things they would not be able to do that would require certain levels of training. I don't know, maybe certification or whatnot for certain tasks that regular staff members would have to do. And you'd have to be mindful about that in bringing people on. One thing that I've thought about since my involvement officially came to an end in December was, and I don't think we ever talked about this, but there might be a way to kind of shoehorn in some sort of training, like work experience training for some caregivers who've been isolated. Maybe they've had to quit a job, or maybe they're not employed. This might be an opportunity then to obtain job skill training, relative to caregiving and whatnot, something that they could take out later into the community, maybe, and get themselves employment or something. But there would be a job training component that maybe could be added, and maybe kind of any kind of future considerations in this respect. So how many folks I think people are still coming in, but how many people are still coming into the center and participating?
So we have about 3 dyads, which we called them, that are actively engaging in the both parts, where there's the participant and the volunteer that comes.
Yeah,
and
that's
then,
the dyad, right? The dyad, the caregiver, and the care recipient would make the
right,
dyad. Okay,
right.
yeah.
And then we actually have just as many who are continuing to volunteer whose loved ones have passed away.
Yeah. That's a really the powerful thing for me is to just, again, I've said this before, but there's that sense of community that it built and instilled in them, that they want to keep in their lives, keep that active in their lives, that they still come in and do that. That says a lot about it. So I also know that, the caregivers would come in and they have their special skills and talents and whatnot. Can you speak to some of the activities maybe some of them brought into it, into the center that maybe wouldn't have been available otherwise because of who they were and what their role was there?
Yeah, and just speaking out of experience fully here, again, really focused on what their skill set was and how we could incorporate in that fitting our needs throughout the day. So we had one gentleman who was very social and gregarious. So he would sort of be our greeter for the day when people came in. Oh, hello. And he was just so great at that. And his warm energy made everyone feel so welcome. And then he'd be the best person you can sit with a group and he would just get a conversation going. And while that seems like such a relatively easy task, I mean, when staff are running around with 10 different things going on, having that person that can do that, it's incredibly helpful. It really takes that socialization up to a different echelon. So there would be the really social folks. A couple of them could run larger group activities. Say we have a game of bowling, so they're calling people up because at the center we have large group activities continuously offered throughout the day. So when they can do that, staff can help with the smaller groups. We were also able to do sort of bigger scale things. So we could do really in-depth hands-on art projects because at every table, there would be somebody helping, walking everyone through every single step. We couldn't have done that otherwise.
Yeah, so there were a lot of opportunities for program enhancement by virtue of the fact that people have such diverse backgrounds, interests, hobbies, and so on and so forth, that they could bring in and share of themselves with the group and bring those factors into the program. I know one of the caregivers owned a bookshop there in San Francisco. And I remember she came and gave a presentation on basically book publication, from the author's inception, the idea for a book, all the way to having it on the shelf, being able to purchase. And then I know from that, they had she had a little art show and featured that in the bookstore of some of the artwork that people created as part of the co-op.
And then their son actually came to the program too, and he is on the rowing team at Georgetown. He did a whole presentation on rowing and had slides, and it was just, it was great because there's an investment, right? They know that their loved one is here at the day program, and they want to bring the same level that they know that their loved one deserves to everybody. So there was such heart in what they did. And at the core of what we do, I mean, that's everything.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the education component and the trainings and whatnot. I know early on that we wanted to provide support to the caregivers, sort of give them maybe tips on self-care, recognizing what the different signs of dementia were, or maybe decoding behaviors in their loved ones. What does it mean when mom's doing this, or dad's starting to wander? I don't really know much about that. Can you tell me more? And how do I handle that? What do I do with it? And communication isn't what it used to be, and I'm not really sure how the best way to communicate, those kinds of things. And then like I said, self-care is so important for caregivers. Just trying to provide them with the kind of trainings that would help them with that, and that's what Imka was so great at, her expertise of designing training modules that would address those types of situations, those types of dynamics that caregivers experience. And early on, when we were having those trainings, so often you would have the formal training, and then that would kind of lead into discussions amongst the caregivers that were participating. And more often than not, a caregiver, they would share about, I'm experiencing X, Y, and Z, and I'm really not familiar with it. I'm not sure what to do with it. And so often another caregiver could say, hey, I know, I've been there. I've been through that. This is what I did, So you would get these people talking and discussing what they were doing, the things that they experienced, being able to share that amongst themselves. And of course, that built community even further. and just that kind of develop that organic sense of support amongst the caregivers.
I was just thinking a little bit more on that, because I think, as I think Alison mentioned as a hurdle early on, we had, I guess, one concept or idea of all these on-site experiences that everyone would come together and be in a room and look at the screen and follow a PowerPoint and be educated, right? But in reality, we had to get creative with all these other ways to get them the learning that they so deserved and needed. So I will reiterate, like, Alison's kind of ability to be like on the floor with them side by side and kind of teaching as the moment's happening in the moment, really. I think a lot of that happened that way. And then I think as an organization, we had to get creative with, more of a virtual experience for many so that they could be available. We went back and forth with, do we require them to participate or do we make it optional? How stringent do you get in terms of really what you expect for this caregiver to give, I guess? And so, I think, like, being appreciative that they may not all be able to take advantage of it in the way that you think you're going to offer it. So the virtual was a move, I think, for us. And we also have a online training program for our staff. And what was unique that we found in this training program was that there was a family caregiver training module component. And so we were able to start offering that to co-op participants as well. Those family caregivers could go on and get that at their leisure. They could get that training when they were able and on their own. So I think that helped being flexible with that expectation.
Yeah, there were issues about trying to get people, because of their different schedules. Not everybody was there at the same time, not like an employee where, like, okay, so we're going to have a formal training between 10 and 11 on Wednesdays, because that's not going to fit everyone's schedule. So there had to be flexibility. Like you say, there needs to be flexibility. Not only how you give, like, the more formal trainings of, say, if you've got like a formal training module that you want to present that information, there's that, but there's also the informal support and training that's occurring at all times during the while people are there. So there really needed to be, I when I first started, I was thinking in kind of rigid terms, like, well, we're going to have trainings at this time on this date, and this is how it's going to be, and you need to come in. Well, soon found out that that's not going to work. That's not tenable. That you can't do that. You really have to meet them to where they're at, both, emotionally, psychologically, and physically, to be able to do that. And so I think any organization that would be considering, replicating this model, that's something to take into consideration about how you do that. And flexibility is the key. In how that's approached and how you're able to do that for anyone.
I think there's flexibility, and then we were a little challenged sometimes in regards to committing them to a schedule. And so that was definitely something that we maybe didn't expect to be so challenging as well. Getting people to, that we knew on Wednesdays, Anna was going to be here from 9 to 3 was really important for a director of a program to know and be able to count on in terms of what is the program that she or he might bring that day, that we can plan around, as well as just counting them, for help with the dishes or whatever else the tasks that we're experiencing. So I would say from a scheduling perspective, maybe trying to be really clear of what you need and filling in those gaps and really kind of working on a schedule that works for both the organization or the day program itself, as well as for the individual that's providing, those hours. So feels a little bit uncomfortable maybe to hold them to that, but it's really operationally so necessary to have that solidified right at the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we battled with what to call it, because if it's a volunteer role, it's gonna get put on the back burner. If something comes up at work, a sick child at home, of course those take priority. But yeah, we talked a lot about what to call it, because there's a lot of accountability in a title. and we've needed that buy-in. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
That was definitely a challenge.
Yeah. And I think, understanding that buy-in that you're speaking of, those hours on the floor, those service hours were offsetting their cost, and really making sure that they understood that buy-in was essential. Like those service hours were what it took, I think, to really be able to be sustainable for them to have that discounted rate that they were counting on. We needed to count on that time that they were there to support the program.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bottom line there that it's an organization, you're running a program, and there's bottom line considerations in terms of staffing, what's available, where you need people for any given day. And if you don't have that structure in place, they can't really support the program overall. So it's trying to navigate between those two factors, right? Yeah, you want to help people out and in the challenges that they're facing as a caregiver and whatnot, provide that support, those opportunities to build community, to be able to lower the rates. However, it's also contingent on the fact of fitting that into the organization and the structure that you have in place. And yeah, it's a real challenge to do that, but it is essential that it be done. And you say that buy-in, and that people have a recognition of like, well, yeah, we want to provide this service. It's the right thing to do for a community and for caregivers and so on and so forth. At the same time, if we don't do that, we won't have an adult day program, and it'll defeat the purpose. So,
yeah. Holding family caregivers accountable in that area is a little bit, out of the comfort zone, maybe, for us, because that's not usually how we are working directly with family members. Often is counting on them for help. So that's
yeah. So I mean, it was a challenge for the caregivers, and then for you folks as having an organization. It was a challenge too, because it brought in that different dynamic, one that, well, how do we approach this? We want it to work. And I don't want, we don't want to come across as taskmasters and you need to do this and that, but there has to be a certain level of that in place, or it won't work. And then we won't be able to provide those other factors that we're trying to address. Yeah.
So setting the stage and really setting the expectation right in the beginning is key, and having them understand their value and their contribution right up front, like that we're really counting on them just as much as they're counting on us. So just understanding that, I think, is important.
Yeah, and then it goes back to that idea of collaboration, the co-op. We're working together to make this happen. And there has to be certain things in place, certain expectations, and things in place in order for it to work, and which goes again back to that buy-in. So yeah, very important. Tell me about was there opportunities for folks to come in at different times, or was that somewhat flexible in being able to move people around in scheduling and whatnot? Did people become more cognizant of the commitment that it took over time? I know that when I was there was some issues with folks that I don't think they were fully committed and didn't take it, for lack of a better term, seriously in that regard. Did you find that became easier over time, or did it kind of remain a kind of a big challenge?
That's a great question. It was a mix. It was definitely a mix, because again, kind of what we've been getting at this whole time, it's life is still happening outside of the center here, and it's a group of people who are overwhelmed, right? Again, they're working 40 hours outside of this. So it truly was a mix. Some people, it got harder for them to keep up the commitment. Some people locked in their days. But it was a challenge. You don't want, 5 people there to help on Thursday and then no one's there on Monday and Tuesday. So you leaning into them for this stuff without burning them out further. It was a dance, and truly, like, every participant, every dyad was unique and had their own challenges, whether it was they couldn't be there until after, 11:30, or, the skill set they yeah, they were so shy and had a hard time to be around people, whatever it was, we had to really manage it case by case. So there was no norm. That was the other thing.
Everyone's situation was so different. Not only, I mean, from work scheduling or, scheduling their daily schedules to who they were as people, and what they were able to come in and offer to the program. When I was recruiting for it, one of the questions people would ask when you talk about, well, you volunteer your time, skills, talents, so on and so forth, as a caregiver volunteer. And it would stump a number of people. What do I have to offer? I don't know. What can I do? And I think, and then other people were more enthusiastic about it. Like Neil, I would say, early on, he played guitar. He wanted to come in and he wanted to lead people in sing-alongs, and he did, and he was great, gregarious and wonderful at that. And then you have other people that more in the background, and they would just quietly go about maybe doing meal service, plating food and taking it out to the care recipients and whatnot. So there are different levels of what people could do.
Totally. And, you're not hiring for a position, right? You're taking them as they come. And so that being said, we had people that went above and beyond, and they would come every day with their loved one, or they would come multiple days, even though we only required one.
That's right. Yeah. Folks would come in. Well, of course, we know that there's a group that comes in on Fridays. Their loved ones are unfortunately no longer with us, but they decided they still come in for that sense of community. And then other people would come in formally, be there certain days of the week, but they would also come additional days just because of the environment, and they wanted to be around that energy and be there because it was providing them a certain amount of support, comfort, avenues to get out of their caregiving role and expand their world somewhat,
I think it was giving some a sense of purpose, despite all of, what they're going through. There was a reason, they were able to take something really challenging and bad that they've experienced personally and kind of channel that into giving to others. And I think that really probably filled a bucket or two as well for people.
Absolutely. And as we talked about, we started this during basically I was going to say the tail end of the pandemic, but that's not true, because it was going on, but things were starting to relax a little bit more by the time you were able to open the center and have it operational, because it had been shut down due to the pandemic. But then in June of 21, we were able to open the facility and whatnot. So folks, I mean, caregiving can be such an isolating role. If you're in that caregiving role, it can be so isolating. That's one of the big stressors that people experience. But it was exacerbated by the pandemic. So I think there was a certain level of eagerness for people to get out of that dynamic, having been in the pandemic. Having said that, it's still very isolating. I mean, absolutely is. To have this kind of a situation where you can come out and be a part of something, kind of share a common goal, a common purpose with other people that are experiencing many of the same things that you're experiencing, is a pretty powerful dynamic for people to have the opportunity to be a part of that. So very, it was a challenge. When we started that, I think I started in the middle of the pandemic in the summer of 2020. And for a while, I was conducting the co-op, trying to hold a cohort of recruits together until the facility opened for about eight months, I guess it was, and trying to do that virtually. But, just to have, even virtually, to have that forum where people can come and talk and know that there's other people out there. During that time, people started to form connections. So when the center opened up in June of 21, they were kind of, a certain number of them were able to hit the ground running, so to speak. They had already kind of forged some relationships and whatnot for that. So, for any other organization, that would be interested in, like, what, this sounds really interesting. we might like to try to give it a go at our center. What would be some of the things operationally that you would advise or that you could share that they might want to be mindful of, tips like that? And then from terms of just the day-to-day operation, being out on the floor with activities and whatnot, what are some things some advice that you could share with organizations that might be considering something like this? Yeah, Jamie.
We're both like, I think I got something on the tip of our tongue. I think one of the things that I reflect on in terms of just this the uniqueness of this setup and what we experienced as a collaboration was we were able to identify, a source that would help us just with the funding a portion of this, which I think was unique to how we kick this off and gave us the opportunity to really learn as we go, because we had this this foundation that supported our cause, believed in what we were trying to do, and gave us the opportunity to offset some of the costs that might have been somewhat stressful for us in the beginning. So I think that was something to consider, especially as a nonprofit. We identify supporters that would resonate with the kind of work we're doing. And, I think one of the things that this program deserves credit for is reaching maybe some of the people that would have otherwise not been able to afford us. And so getting people who maybe would be considered underserved, or just having them maybe not this be an accessible option. It was really nice and unique that we were able to have that other collaborator that helped support some of those financial needs we had.
Yes. I'm remiss for not having mentioned this earlier, but that was the Stupsky Foundation in San Francisco. They were so supportive of what we were doing, and they're supporting this conversation today. They granted us a no-cost extension in getting the word out about the co-op, put together a digital binder for any other organization that might want to replicate what we're doing. And there'll be information connected to this video later on that where any organization that would like access to that binder can go ahead and access that. And then, of course, they can reach out to Daybreak and myself if they want any further information about what that looks like. So.
Yeah, and I would say just go in with as much structure as you initially can have. I mean, we were building this up from nothing. So it was a lot of hits and misses, a lot of forms we created and then got rid of, ideas that we tried and then scratched. So really have as much organization and clarity specifically for what you need from the co-op members and how they can provide it. So down to a write-up of what you do during the day, what you can do during the day, to what happens if you miss 3 sessions, what clear expectations, clear guidelines, because that clarity actually does offer more off of their plate. It's less uncertain, less unknown. So it is a tool to them. And it might seem like you're adding too much to the burnt out caregiver, but truly that's a key component of it. And it really helps as much as you can have that before your launch. But again, you'll learn as you go too.
Lean on that binder that you're talking about there, Roger. Like anyone can lean on the binder. Those are the things that stuck for us, right? That will live in that binder now. And I think maybe identifying a point person. We were fortunate to have you, Roger, from Daybreak as kind of a supplement to the team. And I think having a point person that helps to just keep things moving forward, keep promoting and telling the story and keeping people engaged and accountable to the situation and what they signed up for is really helpful. Having that be a main designated point person is key.
Yeah, those are good things to keep in mind for any organization that would be considering doing this and replicating it in their own program. So, and I before we sign off here, I just wanted to not only thank you both for being a part of this today, but since I'm not over there anymore, it was such a pleasure to work with the both of you. To be in such an innovative program and such a positive environment that the Institute on Aging has there at that center. not to mention, Jamie, what's behind you is that is the center in the Presidio in San Francisco. And it was just like, I had to pinch myself when I first went there. I had no idea it was in such a beautiful setting. So not only did we do such wonderful work and whatnot, be able to work with such a great organization, but the actual physical setting was just like the cherry on top. You know, it was just a really wonderful experience in my life. And to be able to be a part of that and to be able to see the effect that it had on those that were all a part of it, it was a really special time in my life. Just I wanted to share that personally. So thank you all for that.
Happy to have you back anytime.
Yeah, I'll be reaching out to you. I'm overdue for a visit. Some of the caregivers have reached out to me, and they want to know where I'm at. They want to see me, and I think Friday is going to be the day. So one of these Fridays, I'll head your way, and I'll let you know when that is. And hopefully, we can all get together. So I think on that note, I think we'll go ahead and end this webinar for the time being. And thank you both again for being a part of it. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Bring your dancing shoes, Roger.